thank you in advance for muting yourselves. Great to have you all here. If Sarah Gentry wants to keep an eye on the waiting room, I will jump in and get started. Yay! Okay. Happy holidays to everyone. Welcome to our last Lunch and Learn webinar of the year, where we are having a very cozy fireside chat with two special guests today, and I will introduce them in just a moment. I want to thank you all for being part of our amazing year here at the CMTA. We could not have done it without you. This has been really such a special year about connections, being back in person, which has been wonderful. We've had walks for CMT, cycles for CMT, amazing events, camp on the West Coast, camp on the East Coast, a patient summit in Boston, and an exorbitant amount of money invested in SAR research. So it's a tremendously successful year. And again, that is all community driven. We could not have done that without you. So I thank you for joining us one more time so late in the year for this special event. Really happy to have you all here. As I mentioned, we would like you all to stay muted, please, because we have a lot of questions and answers to get through. We have asked for questions in advance, and those are the questions that we'll be working through first. For the people who sent questions, if you happen to register today and send a question today, that question did not make it onto this list, but if we have time at the end, we will answer, or I will reach back out to you personally and make sure that your question gets answered. All of those questions have come to me. And so I will introduce Catherine and Sue, who are joining us from the staff, and then Catherine will review with you the flow of the day, and we'll jump into the Q&A. So it's my great pleasure to be here with you. I should probably introduce myself first. Sorry, I shouldn't assume that you all know me. I'm Laurel Richardson, Director of Community Outreach for the CMTA, finishing 5.5 years on staff. I can't believe that. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our new CEO, Sue Brune, and Catherine Forsey, our Chief Research Officer. So I will turn it over to Catherine to jump in.
Thank you, Laurel. Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Forsey. I'm the Chief Research Officer of the CMTA. I've been in post for about 18 months, and it's wonderful to have the chance to see you all on this Zoom today. As you can tell, probably from my accent, I'm British, so it's getting on for dinner time here in the UK. So lunch is off the cards, and it's definitely a dinner and learn for me. What we're going to be doing today is we thank everybody who sent questions in advance. We have a long list of questions that Sue and I have been working through. We're going to try and get through as many of them as we can in the time that we've got. And we're just going to bounce informally backwards and forwards between myself, Sue, and Laurel, depending on who's the best person to answer the question. I've already seen a couple of people put extra questions in the chat. And as Laurel said, if we've got time, we'll get to those at the end. So now we know what we're going to be doing. I'm going to hand over to Sue. Sue Bruin's our new CEO. She's been with us for a few weeks now, and I'm going to allow Sue to introduce herself so you can all make the chance to get to know her. Over to you, Sue.
Thanks, Catherine and Laurel, for your kind introduction, and welcome to everyone. It's just really great to be able to squeeze this in, as Laurel said, to the end of the year. I know it's a really busy time for everyone. And so it's great to be able to spend a little bit of time and answer any questions that I can. I'm going to make Catherine do all the really hard ones because she's super smart, and we'll just send those over to her. No, so I'm a scientist by training, long career in as a chemist and a biologist, but spent my professional career as a drug developer. So I've worked in many companies, both big and small, always working in rare diseases and very patient-focused sort of orphan drug development. So really delighted to be able to bring that drug development background and my passion for rare diseases to the CMTA. Really excited with my first, I haven't quite hit my 2-month anniversary, so I'm still pretty fresh and learning and listening. And, I really want to hear from all of you about your journey, because that helps us develop drugs, frankly, in the disease. When you're trying to find the pathway, it's really the patients and the community that light the way, so that we understand what's important to make patients feel better and ultimately find a cure. So excited to be on board, excited to answer all your questions. On a personal level, I'll say I have two grown sons. One is out in San Francisco, and one is in Cleveland, and looking forward to the holidays and interacting with all of you in 2024. So with that, I will turn it back to Laurel, who's going to moderate for us today, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sue. It's so great to have you here, and we're just thrilled to have you leading the organization. It's going to be an amazing, amazing year. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in and go through some of the questions that have come in. We'll just take it one at a time. So the first question that I'm going to send over to Catherine is a big one. What is the most hopeful research in near time for CMT1B?
Thanks, Laurel. So I'm going to pop a link in the chat. I had it ready to go because what we try and do at the CMTA is also make sure that we have updates of our research and what projects we're doing available for you on the website, so you can easily find them for your particular subtype. But to give you some more detail, for 1B, just like for all of the CMT subtypes, we have a multi-pronged approach. So we have some projects to help us understand the natural history of CMT. And what that means is, how does the disease affect you as a patient? How is it progressing over time? And also to look for biomarkers. That's things in our blood or things we can measure in our body quite easily that could help maybe link to how our body's been affected by CMT. So we have a biomarker and natural history study going on. That's really important because unless we understand the disease really well, we won't be ready for a clinical trial. We don't know enough about the disease, so we can't say if the treatment has stopped it. And then we have some other projects that help us better understand what is going on in 1B that causes us to have the disease and the disease symptoms. So we've been supporting different researchers. I'm going to drop some names, but if you click on the link in the chat, you'll see more on their names and their projects. So we've been working with Maurizio D'Antonio, who's based in Italy, Laura Feltry at Buffalo in the US, and Jordan Verplank also in the US, through different projects over the last few years to help us learn more about 1B and identify some treatment targets. That's been really interesting, showing how the toxic proteins build up in the cells and how our body could be used to help get those proteins out. So trying to get the body to work for itself. So that's what those projects are focused on. We also have a new project in the pipeline. It was only approved by our board yesterday, so I can't tell you much more about it until all the contracts have been signed, because that will be silly of me. But please, if you've got 1B, look out for an announcement on that. That project's going to cover 1A and 1B, and we'll share that with you once the paperwork's all been signed.
Thank you, Catherine. Wonderful. Very exciting research happening in type 1s and with 1B, so that's wonderful. Amazing team. The next question is actually one that I can answer. Someone asked, how can I get diagnosed and find a doctor near me? So I think the best way to go through the diagnostic journey, if you suspect you have CMT or family members with CMT and you're exhibiting CMT symptoms, is to go to a CMTA Center of Excellence. We have, there are 55 centers of excellence, 51 in the United States and 4 overseas. And we have a Center of Excellence map on our website, which will be shared in the chat. And that is really the best place to go to start your diagnostic journey or to continue being seen by a CMT expert. How does someone receive the Center of Excellence distinction? And it is just a distinction. It is not that the CMTA runs those clinics, and that's really important to understand. We are identifying who those neuromuscular neurology specialists are, meaning they've done a neuromuscular fellowship in neurology. They run a multidisciplinary clinic for CMT, so that when you go to a Center of Excellence, in theory, hopefully you're seeing multiple providers at one time, not just the neurologist, but perhaps the genetic counselor or a PT/OT, an orthotist. Again, the CMTA does not run the clinic, so not all clinics are set up the same, but that is the goal. And also that is a neurologist who has a very large existing CMT patient base. So we already know that they see and treat patients with CMT. So I would encourage you to get to a Center of Excellence to be seen by a CMT expert. to start or go through your diagnostic journey. So that is that question. And the next question is, yeah, so people are asking Sue about Novartis and what is going on with that potential treatment and research for CMT1A. If you want to touch on that, please.
Yeah, sure. So it's been exciting. Started in a little biotech called DTX, and it's a gene therapy approach for 1A, and they were cooking along as a little biotech. As something happens in what we call the biotech ecosystem, if big pharma companies get really excited about something, they'll acquire the company and bring it in-house and focus on that development themselves. And so they acquired by Novartis, and so it's now officially a Novartis program. And I think what's exciting about that is big pharma's recognition that this is a disease worth investing in. They wouldn't have done it if they didn't think that, you know, this had a really high probability of success, because they spend a lot of money to acquire it and bring it in-house. And one thing big pharma is really good at is getting things across the finish line. So it's in the hands of very experienced and accomplished drug developers. Obviously, Novartis is a well-known, got a lot of projects. And so having something in a rare disease in a big company like that, I think really is very helpful, and it's going to move it forward. It still has to go through all the same steps. And so it's probably, you know, a few years away from getting approved, but they're going to have to do clinical trials. And one of the things that's really important to us at the CMTA is to be enablers of anyone who's focused on drug development there. And so, you know, helping patients get connected to companies who are recruiting for clinical trials is something we're really committed to. And I'll put in a little plug for Patients as Partners, Catherine, on your behalf, because that's how we understand you are, how to find you, and what subtype you have. And so for these really subtype specific treatments like gene therapy tends to be, make sure you sign up for a Patients as Partners profile, because that helps us connect you to people who might be interested in clinical trials.
Thank you, Sue. Next question, Catherine, over to you. Someone wrote in and asked, how is DNA research coming along?
That's a great question. So DNA research could mean a couple of things. So I'm going to cover both things that the person asking could have meant. So if by DNA research you mean the genetic causes of CMT, we're looking at our DNA to see what causes our CMT, then the CMTA is funding a Genesis project, which is based out of the University of Miami and works with the Inherited Neuropathy Consortium Network. And we've been supporting research that's contributed to the discovery of mutations in over 130 genes now, and we've got a list of 165 different CMT subtypes. And if that wasn't enough for us to try and find treatments for, there were 5 new ones that were identified just in this year, just in 2023. So this is really exciting because 40 to 50% of people with CMT still don't know what the genetic cause of their CMT is. So it's really helpful. The CMT helps to fund work that finds that out, and we're going to continue to support these DNA research discovery efforts. That reason for that is because sometimes when you find that genetic cause, it can really quickly lead to the development of treatments. So some of you might be familiar with the CMT SORD story, SORD. That went from discovery of the genetic cause through to first-in-human clinical trials within 2 years. Because it identified a really handy target for treatment. If the question on DNA research is about the development of genetic therapies, then the CMTA is also funding projects that cover type 1 CMTs, type 2 and type 4 CMTs to help develop genetic therapies, and also innovative projects around delivery. Because it's all well and good having genetic therapies, but can we get them to the furthest parts of our peripheral nervous system, all the way to the fingers and toes? And then, of course, we're also watching closely for developments in other diseases, so similar diseases to CMT, and looking for what gene therapy approvals have been granted, because that helps to lay a pathway for those first CMT therapies to come to the market. You might also have read that the CMTA has recently invested in a company called Armatus Bio. So that's one of the most advanced CMT genetic therapies in development. Currently, that company is doing some testing in larger animals to help show if their treatment can get all the way through the nerves in the furthest parts of our body, because some of our nerves can be a meter long. So we need to make sure that the therapy can get all the way down to the end. So it's a really brief summary of what's happening in DNA research at the moment, the two different types.
It's incredible. It's so incredible to hear the scientists and researchers from the STAR Scientific Advisory Board talk about that. It's just for them to say it's such a remarkable time in research is so exciting and hopeful. As someone living with 1A, I love to hear their enthusiasm and excitement. Okay, next question is actually touching on the mental health side of living with a chronic illness or progressive disease like CMT. So someone wrote in, Catherine, and asked, how do you stop depression and panic attacks?
So it's actually a question that's not unique to CMT. But of course, we completely recognize that those of us who are living with CMT often struggle with managing the mental health side of living with a chronic disease. When we know we have it, we know what the progression might look like. If we look at members of our family, that can really affect our mental health. So what we would encourage is reach out to your local support services, so mental health support professionals, your family doctor, and see what local services that you can access the mental health support. They might be community groups, networks, talking therapies, but also the local CMT branches. So the CMTA has branches all over the world, many of them in America. And they can help provide in-person support. And this is from people who understand. And I've talked with members of our community who say it's just nice to be in a room with someone that believes me, that believes that these symptoms are real and understands what I'm going through. And that can be so good for our mental health. So reach out to your local branch, and please just don't underestimate the importance of finding your CMT tribe. I'm 18 months into my involvement with the CMTA, and it's really amazing how the community comes around and it becomes like a second family, and it really provides lots of support, which can be great for the mental health side. But any severe problems, please speak to your family health practitioner and they'll be able to direct you to local health services.
Wonderful, Catherine. Thank you for sharing that information. And I also just want to plug a future program that we're working on and hoping to launch in early 2024. And that is an emotional support group virtually. So we would meet monthly on Zoom, and the group would be led by 3 of our mental health professionals that are part of the CMTA, and they also live with CMT, so they really know firsthand what some of those challenges are. So stay tuned, make sure you're signed up for e-news so that you are alerted when that group launches and you have the opportunity to join, because we'd love to have you. Next question is always a big one and comes up daily in the community. But can you talk about clinical trial opportunities, Catherine? And then if Sue wants to chime in, however you all want to do that. But Catherine, if you want to start and tell us about some clinical trial opportunities, how does someone living with CMT get involved?
Happy to talk about that. So a few years ago, we would have been struggling to talk about clinical trial opportunities. That's the speed of progress that there's been in CMT research. There's more clinical trials that are opening, or we can see them on the horizon. So currently, the CMTA has been supporting recruitment for Applied Therapeutics, their ongoing CMT SWORD trial, and Farnex's trial for PXT3003. Farnex have been active for around 10 years now. They've just finished a 6-year open label extension study. So the CMTA helped with supporting recruitment for those. How we tell the community about those is through our Patients as Partners in Research mailings. So it's already been popped in, but it'll probably go in the chat again. What we're hoping and anticipating is that new clinical trials will start in 2024 and 2025. And as soon as the CMTA has details for those, we'll be helping those organisations recruit those trials. And what we'll do is we'll share those opportunities with everybody who's registered on the CMTA's Patients as Partners in Research. So if you head to the CMTA website and fill in a profile, also currently on the Patients as Partners in Research page, That's a good tongue twister. We've got 14 studies that are currently recruiting. So that ranges from clinical trials through to natural history studies, because before you have a clinical trial, you need to understand disease progression as it would happen normally without treatment. So the natural history studies are really important, and we need the community to get involved with those. Um, and also there might be researchers who put out surveys and they're looking at the impact of different conditions on CMT or how CMT affects your body. So again, get involved in those if you can. So yeah, that's where it will be. Patients as partners in research will be how you find out about clinical trial opportunities. And as soon as we know about them, we'll be sharing them with the community.
Thank you so much. Next question, moving right along. If you get tested for CMT from more than one company, should the results be the same?
Catherine, you want to take that? Or you want me to take that?
I am happy either way, Sue. I'm ready to do it if you want me to.
Well, why don't I start and then you can correct me if I don't get it wrong. I mean, I think it's a tricky answer in a way. I think different companies have created different gene panels, and sometimes they don't test exactly the same things. And so it's possible that you would send a sample to one company and a sample to another company, and you get a different answer because they're testing either for a smaller number of genes or a larger number of genes or a different subset of genes. So it is actually that you could get different answers from different companies. So I think it's important to work with a genetic counselor to really put that in context. And then there's, of course, bigger sequencing projects where you could sequence your whole genome. That's if you come up with something unknown, then you're really kind of looking at everything. But for these panels, they're actually not always the same. And I think that's why this conversation with your genetic counselor is so important. Catherine, did I miss anything there?
No, I think you nailed it, Sue. It is possible to ask which test did I have done from which company and what genes were on the panel. Because those panels are updated with new gene discoveries. So you don't know when that panel was most recently updated. When I speak to our genetic specialist, they say it can be useful to rerun the sample maybe like every 2 years if the panels get updated. But also it really depends on what test you have done, because quite often the pathway for genetic diagnosis is they'll do a family history and then they might start and just check for 1A first, because that's 50% of people with CMT. And then if 1A comes back negative, then they'll start to dig and go further. So that is really useful to know. But yeah, you can get different answers depending on what they're testing for. So always ask that question. Most people who have testing are looked after by a genetics counsellor when they do it. So they'll be able to answer all of the questions when you get the results back.
Thank you, Sue and Catherine. Next question, and this comes up also all the time in the community, and I wish there was one hard and fast answer, but it's pretty broad. So here's the question. What kind of exercise is best for those with CMT, and is there any exercise that is detrimental?
So the general sort of rules around this and the sort of mantra we have here at the CMTA, born out of speaking with physiotherapists and personal trainers, is exercise is completely encouraged for people with CMT, but it's really important to listen to your body. So it really helps to work with a physical therapist or a trainer who knows about CMT and who can tailor a program to your unique symptoms and abilities. They might not need to get what CMT is, like they don't need to be a CMT specialist. But if you can share with them that, you know, my balance is affected, or I struggle to know where I am in sort of time and space, we call that proprioception, or I have weakness in my lower legs, you can tell them how your CMT affects you, and they'll be able to adapt an exercise and training program to suit you. And the best thing is that exercise has been shown to help improve CMT symptoms, and it's going to help you stay stronger and mobile for longer. So often the ones you'll see recommended most for CMT are swimming because it's non-weight bearing, yoga and Pilates, Tai Chi, anything that's going to help develop a strong core. And then walking and cycling if you can. And there's lots of adapted cycles out there for people who need one. I know I need a trike because I topple off a normal bike. The trick is to really find something that you enjoy with any training program. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to stick to it. It's not going to be meaningful change. So and also bust some myths. People with CMT can build muscle in the majority of their bodies. So a good trainer will help you focus on your areas of concern. The CMTA, because this question comes up a lot, has a really fantastic selection of exercise videos that are specifically developed for people with CMT. We'll put a link to that section of our website into the chat so you can find it really easily. And also, as a little plug to look out, January, in the new year, the CMTA is starting a new collaboration with John Nixon, who's a personal trainer and prize-winning bodybuilder. That man can show you how to build muscle with CMT. He's going to be doing a new series of videos, so you can find him via the CMTA discussion group on Facebook, where he shares supportive and encouraging posts almost every day about how you can exercise with CMT.
Thanks, Catherine. One of my favorite answers to this question came recently at our Boston Patient Summit. Dr. Chuang from the Center of Excellence in Boston was speaking. She is a neurologist, but she's also a rehabilitation specialist. And someone said, how do I know if too much exercise, if I've exercised too much, or if I'm harming myself, as it relates to CMT? And she said, if you exercise to the point where after you exercise, you can't do your activities of daily living, like cooking for yourself, showering, going about doing the rest of the things you would do every day. If your exercise has impacted your activities of daily living, then pull back a little, do a little bit less. Or if you are exercising and you're sore for more than 2 or 3 days, then you're probably over exercising. So again, like Catherine said, really listen to your body, but keep moving, find something that works for you. I'm talking to myself too when I say that out loud. Okay, so next question. Great answers, everyone. Thank you. Someone wrote in and said, please give some statistics on the number of patients with CMT2CC.
So I love when people ask about super rare types of CMT. So for those who don't know, CMT2CC is caused by variants in NEFH, which is a protein that's involved with neurofilaments. I think neurofilaments, like the name suggests, these tiny filaments that are the major scaffolding proteins, and they help to keep the sort of neurons in the right shape and help that neural network. So if there's a problem with the genes and the proteins that support that, then you could end up with a neuropathy. And this particular one is called CMT2CC. Now, it's a new one, so it was only first described in 2016, so it's not very old yet. And I've had a look, and there is currently no published prevalence data on CMT2CC. So we don't know the number of patients globally who have 2CC, but there was a paper 2 years ago by a team out of London who studied 30 people with CMT2CC across 8 families, and they described that as a large study. So that leads me to believe that it's just one of the very rare types of CMT. And from looking across the different literature in the last couple of days, I would think that there looks to be less than 100 cases that have been identified worldwide. There's quite a few papers that have come out, one in Austria that says the first case we found in all of Austria. So again, it speaks to the rarity. So yeah, it's a rare one, and I would say there's less than 100 cases identified in the world.
Thank you for answering that, Catherine. And we had several questions come in about the Farx PXT 3003 1A trial. There have been a couple of updates that have come out in recent weeks. So Sue, I would love for you to speak to what's going on with that trial, please.
Sure. Thanks, Laurel. And thanks for those questions. And I know that there's been some information that's come out over the last couple of weeks that is output from the company Farx around the trial and the data. So first of all, trials are always really important ways that we understand not just drug work, but how to study a drug generally in a new disease. And I think for diseases, especially important. So I would start by saying thank you to everybody who's a patient and anybody in the community who's a part of the trial. It created an ecosystem for study of the disease that I think has been really important and really powerful. And you always learn things from every clinical trial, even if they don't have the outcome that you want. That's really important for the next trial. And so, we're just so grateful to patients who are willing to help develop these drugs, because no matter what the outcome is, good or bad, learn really things as drug developers and as a community about how to study them. The Farx data, and all we know is companies press release, and they haven't given us the really detailed data yet. But the way that they, some conversations with them direct, Catherine and I both have, what they say is that the two groups, which is sugar pill and the drug that they're testing, really in the end look the same statistically. Everybody did a little bit better. People who were on the drug felt a little better, and people on the placebo felt a little better, but they didn't do any differently as a group. And so there's been a lot of questions about why that might be. One of the reasons that we study placebos in clinical trials is because there is such a thing as a placebo effect, which is not a bad thing. It tells us a little bit about the power of the mind. Sometimes when you think you're getting better, you actually do get better. This is why things like meditation and yoga help. It's a very powerful thing, but unfortunately, it does help us understand whether something's the result of the drug. In this case, I would say at the top level, the question they asked is what we call their primary endpoint. The main endpoint doesn't look like it was successful. Now, sometimes what happens after you get that data is you look into it more deeply, you look at other endpoints you looked at, smaller groups, the patients that did better, a case for, and that's what the company's in the midst of doing now. They put out another press release yesterday that suggests maybe there are some groups of people who did a little bit better than others. And so they're continuing to do that data analysis. Again, we've only heard their summaries. We haven't seen the data. And I think what they're hoping to find is some nuggets in that data that would help them take it forward to a regulatory agency like the FDA or the EMA in Europe and get it approved. But I think until we see that data at the CMTA, we're going to be cautious about it, and ear to the ground on what that data is and what that process is. But I do understand from the company they're going to try to find a way to get it into regulators' hands for a decision.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate that answer. Next question came in is one that I can answer. Someone wrote in asking about how do you know when it's time to look at bracing or orthotics, and who decides that? And I'm not an orthotist, but I'm a person who wears AFOs and braces and have loved them. I started wearing them about 11 years ago. And so what I would say to you is always be evaluated by a medical professional. If you want, the goal is to get your foot into the correct position so that you are not causing long-term knee problems, hip problems, and back problems. You also want to consider safety. If you are tripping and falling, it is time to consider some type of aid. If it's AFOs or orthotics, something to help stabilize your foot, stabilize your gait, and make sure it's safe. So I would encourage you to be evaluated. If you have a neurologist and say, I feel like maybe I should see an orthotist, they can send you. My primary care doctor actually sends me, she writes me a prescription to get my braces with an orthotist, and I just take that prescription to an orthotist. But you need to have gait evaluation. Someone needs to see you walk, and you need to start thinking about safety first. I really waited too long. I was tripping and falling and taking terrible falls, and then finally was like, okay, I really need to do something about this. So I would encourage evaluation and really be open-minded. When you first go to braces, they feel really weird. It feels like a foreign object on your body, but it's unbelievably fast how well your mind adjusts and your body adjusts to them. And if they are causing rubbing or irritation, keep going back to your orthotist and have them solve that problem for you. Make sure you have a wonderful bracing partner, a wonderful orthotist that you're working with. If they're not going to help you solve your problems, then find another orthotist, because they're amazing orthotists partners out there who will help you. Okay, the next question that came in is CMT both type 1 and 2 officially considered a disability, and do you offer guidance with getting Social Security disability? So this question comes in not as often to the community because in our Facebook discussion groups, people will post there about this and get good answers. But we held a Facebook Live webinar a couple of years ago with one of our advisory board members who's very experienced in this area. So I'd be happy to send that out to you, to the person who sent this question, and I can send that out. I would encourage you to consult with an attorney. It is my understanding that it can be more successful. It can speed up the process if you're working with an SSDI attorney. And also be sure to have as much history, progression tracked on your medical records, because it's also my understanding that they would really need to see that history of progression. But please reach out to me. I'm happy to try to dig up the recorded video on this topic and get that to you. And if anyone else wants it, let me know. I don't have it right this second to put in chat, but I will certainly look for that. Okay, we're doing pretty well on time. If you have a specific Center of Excellence question, please reach out to me and I will help you find somebody near you. So Catherine, this one's for you. Next question is, how can I help my clients with foot drop? So I'm guessing this came in maybe from a physio or orthotist.
I'm guessing, and my suggestion would be, if you are a physio, then work with an orthotist and vice versa. So the two can really work together really nicely to help explore all options around physical training and, of course, bracing and AFOs, which Laurel has already mentioned. And then the other person who could come into play, depending on the severity of the foot drop and how it's presented, what's causing it and how it's affecting the person, is having a conversation with an orthopedic surgeon, because sometimes they can do surgery with tendon transfer to help improve the position of the foot and hold it in place. But that they would only move to that once other avenues have been exhausted. Surgery tends to come last. So orthotist, physical therapy, and orthopedic surgeon are kind of your three places to start to refer to and have conversations with.
Excellent. Next question. Catherine, I'll throw this back to you as well. Someone wrote in and asked, is it accurate that people diagnosed in infancy tend to have more severe outcomes?
So as a rule, you can't just say, I'd say no. You can't say that as a blanket statement. Most of the time in science, we don't like sweeping blanket statements anyway, but age of diagnosis doesn't predict severity or speed of disease progression. Also in CMT, progression is not linear. So you don't just get worse at the same rate over time. So some people might have symptoms in childhood and then they might stabilize for a really long period of their life. One of the challenges with CMT, and those of us who study CMT, is that it affects every single person differently. So even members of the same family with the same type of CMT. But then also with that, it's important to consider how and why someone was diagnosed. So if they were diagnosed in childhood because they had really early symptom onset, and then they might be diagnosed quite quickly because it was apparently really clear what they had, then they might be following a more severe path. And that's why they've come to be diagnosed so young. But with some people, it can take, I think our average from our patients as partners in research data is 14 years for people to be diagnosed, especially when they haven't got it in the same in the family already. However, on the other hand, some people are diagnosed by a genetic test because of a known family history, and they might not have any symptoms. They might not show symptoms until adult life. So they might have been tested as a young child and have nothing to show for it until much later on. Also, though, it depends on the type of CMT. So some types of CMT are earlier and childhood onset and more severe. So again, depends on the type of CMT, and every single person with CMT is unique. That is one of the challenges in treating and managing this condition.
It truly is. It's like a fingerprint. We're all so different. And that really moves us right into the next question, Catherine, which is, how many people living with CMT have mild symptoms and how many are living with more severe symptoms?
So I did a slide for this one. Give me 1 second. I'm going to bring it because it's much easier to show in a picture, this one. So we have done some studies on I say we, the CMT research community has done studies on symptom burden. We call it the burden of disease. So mild CMT, severe CMT, again, it depends on how the individual characterizes it. So this is just one nice little graph. They had 826 people with CMT. This happens to be a study in 1A, and they ranked the symptoms as most important according to the patients. So what do you call severe? What do you call mild? I mean, it comes to every person differently, but you can see that the largest number of people had weakness in their hands and fingers. Some will have difficulty walking, weakness in the feet, fatigue, legs. So unsurprisingly, it's the hands, feet, and legs that are affected in most people. We know that about CMT. Some people experience pain. Some people will have difficulty with stairs. Some people have difficulty breathing. And then all the way through to optic neuropathy and hearing loss, which we know is common in some types of CMT. So it's a big spread, and it just shows how different the disease is. And this is another nice one around mobility scores. So again, I think the question was around like how disabled can people become and what people are affected severely and which people mildly. So this is some data. They looked at 686 people with CMT. Again, they looked at this is just a subset from 1A, and they had people rank whether or not they were experiencing extreme problems through to no problems. So the darker colours are more extreme. So there's only 2% of people who were saying it was extreme, 17% saying they didn't have problems, and then there's a mixture in between. So again, we get a big spectrum of burden of disease. I'll stop my share. But this data comes from a really useful app called CMT and Me app. So some of you might have signed up to it and you might fill in their surveys every month. This is the type of data that they put out, and it helps us to answer those types of questions. So that's just another way that you can help and participate in CMT research, is to get involved in the CMT and Me app and help us answer questions just like that one.
Yes, that is our opportunity to share burden of disease, and we as a community need to do that because nobody's going to do it for us. So thank you for sharing that. The next question came in. Is it common to have negative EMG study with CMT? So it sounds like someone's experiencing CMT symptoms. They went to have the EMG and it was negative. So I reached out to Kenny Raymond on our advisory board, and this is his answer. He wasn't able to join us today. He said it's very uncommon to have normal nerve conduction or EMG results. When symptomatic, there should be detectable nerve conduction abnormalities. However, rarely, and a nerve conduction or EMG might come back normal, and there's many reasons why it might. Misinterpretation of the data. The test was very limited instead of comprehensive, meaning they tested one nerve instead of many. Or the subtype can have fairly normal nerve conduction, such as CMT 2D, just to name an example. And then we also have more information on our website under the Understanding CMT section. So I can share that in the chat as well. But great question. Moving on to more about genetic testing, Catherine or Sue can jump in. Catherine, if you want to start, can you please address the value of genetic testing for CMT? Even though there's no treatment resulting from the testing, is there value in increasing the size of the database?
You're always going to have me say yes, because data is great and it really helps us to learn more about CMT. I think the question also came in with the comment that testing can be quite expensive. So we've been talking with Invitae recently, who are one of the leading providers of a CMT panel. And Invitae, if you're paying out of pocket, you can have the CMT panel for around $250. So depending on your circumstances is whether or not you count that as expensive or not expensive. Insurance can sometimes cover the panel. It's also worth knowing that with the Invitae panel, if you test positive, then related family members can be tested free of charge to see if they have the same mutation. But in terms of the value of genetic testing, it's a really personal decision, and I would encourage everybody to do some reading on the CMTA website about genetic testing and make an informed choice. We are in a rapid era of expansion in terms of genetic therapies, and even some of the small molecules or traditional drug type therapies are looking to be subtype specific. So they'll only be useful for somebody with 1A or 1B or 2A. So often it's important to know your subtype before you can access the treatment. Those treatments are coming. We can see them in a pipeline. So the value of having genetic testing is increasing all of the time. And yes, there is also value in expanding the database. I mentioned Genesis before, and they would like to collect 10,000 patient genomes, and that helps us better understand CMT and all of its different genetic causes. So hopefully that answers that one.
Thank you, Catherine. A lot of questions are overlapping in theme and are getting answered within the answers of other questions. So if you've asked about genetic discovery, gene discovery, Genesis, finding your gene, if you've asked about timelines with drug development and Novartis and far next information, all of that is being answered within the questions and answers we've already provided. So please know that. We are also recording this, and you are welcome to go back and watch again. And always send me your questions if they're not answered in the course of this hour. But we are going to keep moving along. Catherine, I'm switching around a little bit, or jumping over a couple things. The next one is someone wrote in and said they're having trouble coping with fatigue and not being able to do their same level of activity as before.
So my first instinct would be to speak to your family doctor, and if you have a physical therapist, speak to them. Have a look at what you've been doing and if you've changed anything. And it does sound a little bit counterintuitive, but sometimes exercise can help if you're in a carefully managed program under a PT or a physio. Also, it's worth considering there might be something going on that's not just CMT. It's quite quick for us to jump to, oh, it's my CMT causing this. But there could be other things to rule out first. So that's where talking to your family doctor can help. In that case, it helps they don't know anything about CMT because they don't immediately discount it as your CMT, and they'll do some proper investigations with you. So it could be low iron or ferritin levels. It could be the time of year if you struggle with, it's pitch black here at 4 p.m. now. So if you struggle with not having enough daylight, and there are also vitamin deficiencies that can cause fatigue as well. So I would say have a thorough physical done, rule out anything that's not CMT first, and then maybe have a look at your have a chat with a PTOT about exercise and how that can help give you more energy.
Thank you, Catherine. And we also, I'm sorry, I can't remember if you mentioned this, and there was another question about nutrition, so I'm going to tie all this in together. Is that nutrition, we held a nutrition lunch and learn in first quarter of this year, and that is in the webinar recording section of our website. And our guest speaker was Lorna Ryan, I believe is her last name. She has incredible experience in this area. She also lives as a person living with CMT. So I would encourage you to go back through our webinar recordings and watch that nutrition, because she really speaks to supplements. That question came in a lot. But I do feel like, as a person who sometimes struggles with CMT fatigue as well, I think it's CMT or my thyroid, I'm not sure. The food that I put into my body helps tremendously. So anti-inflammatory foods, really eating an anti-inflammatory diet. We should all strive to have less inflammation in our bodies, right? So one of the questions that came in was a community member said, as stakeholders in the community, are you all people living with CMT? And so I'm happy to answer this. And also, the majority of people on staff, there are 8 of full-time staff people at the CMTA. The majority of us have CMT or loved one with CMT. And so I am a 3rd generation CMTer, my dad's side of the family. My sister and I have CMT, and my husband and I have 2 children. They're 18 and 20. They have not been tested yet. So we're not quite sure if they have CMT. They're not really symptomatic. So it was our personal philosophy, if they're not symptomatic, that we don't need to test at this time. But certainly as treatments come down the drug development pipeline, we would urge them to be tested. Catherine?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that too. So there are 4 generations of CMT in my family that we know of. I only found out, I think it'll be 5 years in January, my diagnosis anniversary. And I found out because my sister was having increasing problems. She has hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome as well, and CMT and Ehlers-Danlos together cause her a lot of problems. So her diagnosis journey led to mine. Um, my father and grandfather, late grandfather, have CMT, and I made the decision to have my children tested. I'm based in the UK, and testing was available to me when I was concerned that my son was struggling a little bit with jumping and hopping at the age when he should have reached those milestones. And here in the UK, a diagnosis can help unlock the door to access physical therapy and orthotics and anything that he might need. So I had both of my children tested, and with the flip of a coin, one of them has CMT and the other one doesn't. So at least we know what we're facing into for both of them. Um, so yeah, that's my journey. Relatively new, only 5 years old of diagnosis.
Yes, yeah. So we are, I think that's one of the reasons that there's so much passion behind the CMTA. One of the questions that came into the chat box was someone saying, there's so much information that comes out about CMT from different places, and how do we know where to go to get information? I'm obviously biased as a member of this team, but I was part of the CMTA organization way before I became a staff member. I came to the CMTA because I felt that they were experts in knowledge and how they invest money in research. 90 cents of every dollar goes towards the mission of the CMTA. So, having that highest charity navigator rating really meant something to me as a patient in the community. And it was one of the reasons that I got involved with the CMTA. So yes, there's information about CMT coming from a few different areas in the community. And I would encourage you to just look to see what that organization or where you're getting your information, what they're all about, what they represent, what are their values as an organization, and how do they spend and invest those donor dollars. That's incredibly important. And we're just really proud of the work that we're doing here. And always reach out if there's any confusion whatsoever. If you want to hear more about the CMTA and the 90 cents on every dollar transparency as it is with research and how the organization allocates dollars, don't hesitate to reach out. Anyone on staff is happy to talk to you. I'm sure Sue is only a phone call away. And let's inundate her, right? She's new. Let's see what she's made of. So far, she's like perfect. So let's throw some more hard questions her way. But we're incredibly proud of our perfect score. And it's very meaningful to us and as patients, and I hope it's meaningful to you as community members. So we're coming down to just a few minutes left. So a lot of these questions are, the answers are found within some of the other answers. Again, if you're experiencing any difficulty, with your hands, please go reach out to an OT. And we have to be our best patient advocates. We have to advocate for ourselves. If you are with a doctor who is not open to referring you to PT or OT and you're a person living with CMT, I would encourage you to find a doctor who is willing to help you get seen by a physical therapist, by an occupational therapist, get to an orthotist. So those are really important therapeutic interventions that we might need as people living with CMT. So Catherine, Sue, any last thoughts, any burning questions that
there's a little bit of hot news, and someone's asked about it in the chat, so I'm just going to dive in and
Sure.
share it. So someone's just asked about Tool Gen, because there's been an announcement. So on Monday, so 18th of December, Tool Gen are a CMTA Alliance partner, which means we work with them to support preclinical testing. So we've been working with Tool Gen for a number of years now. And on Monday, they announced that they had received orphan drug designation for their rare disease correction treatment. They called it TGT 001. I love how they come up with the names, but TGT 001. So the FDA have granted orphan drug designation, and TGT 001 targets Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. In particular, it corrects the gene within the body. So it's a genetic therapy, and it uses CRISPR gene editing to regulate the expression of PMP22. That is the gene that is duplicated in CMT1A. So the treatment is designed to treat CMT1A. We've been working with Toolgen via our preclinical testing arm, and have been working and developing strategic partnerships with companies like Toolgen for a number of years as part of the CMTA's strategy to accelerate research. So we're really excited that Toolgen has had their orphan drug designation, and we're going to continue to support their efforts. And for those who don't know what orphan drug designation is, what it does within the US is it provides a range of incentives and support mechanisms that help encourage the development of treatments for rare diseases like CMT. So it helps to speed up some of the administrative processes and cut through a little bit of red tape, overcome some of the financial and logistical challenges that can be associated with developing therapies. Because when you're looking at CMT, where there's a relatively small patient population and it counts as a rare disease, what we need to do is incentivize companies to work in that our disease space, and that's what orphan drug designation does. Just wanted to hop in with that bit of hot news. We'll be putting out a statement through social, but yes, you all heard it on this webinar first.
There you go. It's always wonderful to end with some hot news.
Yes.
Also, an exciting announcement. The one of our partners, TurboMed, is giving away braces. They have given away dozens of pairs of braces generously the last several Decembers at the end of the year. So if you are a person in need of braces and have mild or moderate foot drop, or curious about adding braces and AFOs into your life, I would encourage you to submit for this giveaway. So there are a couple different ways to do that. One is to fill out a survey, and your name will be entered into the drawing, or also on social media. So you should have received an email about it this morning. If you didn't, make sure you're signed up for e-news, please. And otherwise, you can also go to our social media platforms and sign up, put your name in the hat to be considered, not considered, but chance of luck to win the braces that way. But TurboMed is an incredible organization. They build remarkable braces. Many of our community members absolutely love them. So we're so incredibly thankful to TurboMed for that generous donation. So that is, I think, a wrap for us. And it has been truly a pleasure to have you all with us today and throughout the year. I see a repeat of names as you register and have joined us for all 4 quarterly lunch and learns this year. I wish there was a prize for that. If there was a prize, I would send you all one for perfect attendance for the lunch and learns. But instead, I'm just going to say hooray and cheers to you, and thank you for joining us for all 4. I'd like to thank Sue and Catherine for joining us. Catherine, you are now permitted to go to dinner since you are on UK time. Thanks
Thank you,
for
Laurel.
letting us hold you up. Everyone have the most wonderful holiday season. Please know we are here walking next to you in your journey. Happy to answer any questions, and don't hesitate to reach out as at any time. So enjoy the rest of your year. Thanks for being part of the CMTA. Take
Thank
care,
you all.
everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Catherine. That was really fun.
Thank you. Bye bye.